Do I press start? Yeah.
I'll do it. Yeah.
Andy, on the line. Andy.
Yeah.
Hi everybody. Are we live now? Yeah. Welcome to today's session. We'll just give everybody a couple of minutes just to join us. I think there's a few more coming in, is there? Okay, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to today's meet and greet session. Today's focus, as we all know, is on our street teams and the project that the street teams deliver. I'll welcome Helen Matthews and Andy Thompson shortly, who are going to really deliver the session today. I just want to take an opportunity to remind you all that the sessions are recorded, so they will be available if anybody wants to watch them again or share them with teams, or anybody of your colleagues couldn't make today. And after this, they will be on the safeguarding website. The aim, as always, in our meet and greet sessions is to share and get an understanding of what services are available out there and what services provide. This is the meet and greet part of it, really. And then my ask and our ask of you is to take the responsibility to make those connections. So make those connections, get an understanding, build on those relationships to really, in order for us to provide a better service and enhanced service to the children, young people and the families that we support. There is a live question and answers on the side that you should know about. Please encourage you to get any questions out there, and we'll give some time at the end of the session to answer everything. So if that's okay, I'm going to hand you over now to Helen, who's going to tell us all about the Street Teams project. Over to you, Helen. Thank you.
Okay, can everybody hear me? I'm hoping so. I'm not great with technology. Thank you, Julie. So for those who don't know me, I'm Helen Matthews and I'm the CEO of Street Teams. Street Teams is a locally commissioned charity in Walsall, and we've been around since 1999. I've been there for 18 years, and we're working with children who are at risk of exploitation, but not just the children. We're working with the wider community, their families, parents and their siblings. If I could have the next slide, please. And the next one, thank you. So, as I say, with a major voluntary sector project that's commissioned at the moment by Walsall, and we're supporting probably 100 new referred young people every year. What I will say, and Andy will talk about this later, is we're seeing a massive influx of boys at a risk of exploitation. So I'm expecting that figure to be a lot higher as of next year. So we're quite innovative in our approach, and I'm sure some of you on the call will know what we do, but we really respond to local needs. So we've got some really different projects that try and look at the bigger picture of exploitation, looking at disrupting perpetrators, looking at engaging with different sectors of communities to try and make a more resilient Walsall. So we work with all boys, all girls, all ethnicity and all sexualities. I will talk a little bit later about our transition project, but I think we're really passionate about looking at what happens to a child when they get to 18. And as we all know on this call, that children don't stop being victims when they get to 18, but we were finding that services tended to change or drop off. So we make sure now that we work up to the age of 25. We also have had to widen our services. When we first started, we were just commissioned, and we were just around to prevent child sexual exploitation. And if I'm honest, the majority of our referrals at that time were girls. But what we're now doing is, because the landscape of exploitation has changed so much, we're now responding to issues of criminal exploitation, adult rough sleeping sex workers, and also cuckooing, working with some vulnerable adults as well. Next slide. I've mentioned about our partnership work, and one of the great things about Street Teams, although I am a little biased obviously, is what we do within our community and our connections with the wider partnership. And it's great for you to join us today to look at some of these real solid partnerships that we've got with health, education, especially our police colleagues. And you can see some examples on the screen of some of the things we've done. We've got puppets that we go into local schools. That's myself and Andy. Looking at how we talk to children about internet safety. We've got Julie, who's delivering some parenting workshop sessions on, once again, internet. And we've got presentations that we deliver for the wider workforce. So if you're in the wider partnership and want us to come to an event, and do some have some conversations with your delegates or service users on what exploitation is and how you can work together to fight it, we'd be more than happy to do that. I also mentioned that we work with different community members, and about 3 years ago we realised that there was very little being done to educate but also work in partnership with our BAME community. So we're very, very proud that we work with our local mosques, our gurdwaras and other faith sectors to start to break down the barriers, of why these conversations aren't happening. And also, you know, as exploitation professional, I know that a lot of referrals for CSE are usually girls who are white, and we wanted to make sure that we have that opportunity to look at the hidden victims that that might be in our society. Next slide, please. So, as I say, child sexual exploitation, child criminal exploitation incorporating county lines. We do a lot of education in schools looking at grooming, and grooming for radicalisation we touch upon, obviously modern day slavery as well. So fighting all forms of child exploitation. Next slide. If you refer through to street teams, and we'll talk about how you refer, because things are changing in Warsaw, which is great, but if you do get a referral into street teams, we actually provide one-to-one tailored support. So these support sessions are bespoke to the child's individual need, and we know that our clients are often unable to identify their own abuse, so a lot of the work is looking at what is grooming, how are they identifying it, looking at the contextual safeguarding model of their surroundings, their environment, their education, their peer networks. But the main focus of all of our work is to build trust and a real safe, stable and healthy relationship with the child at their own pace. This is, it says on the screen, an intensive process, but also the beauty of our work is it's open-ended. We're not into time limited and monitoring. Obviously, we do monitor distance travelled and what and how the in-person, you know, it has risk decreased and all of that. But really, we're there as a listening ear for that child to advocate on their behalf and hopefully work with our police to look at intel gathering and prosecution of perpetrators. But it's open-ended. It's an open-ended service. Next slide. Cool. Thank you. If you're from an education session or a youth work setting, we can come and deliver education sessions. And on average, I think that figure's increased a little bit now, my fault. I think last year we educated probably 15,000 students in schools and alternative provision sessions like your PRUs, children's homes. We did some scout sessions. And the main object is to talk about what is grooming. I think we have so many different lessons that talk about CSE, county lines, radicalisation, and that's great and needed. But one of the connecting factors between all of this is grooming. And if a child can't spot what grooming is, can't spot the warning signs, not just in themselves, but also in their peers or their family, we're never going to prevent grooming from happening. So if you want to get in touch with us, we can come and deliver sessions for you, and it's all free of charge. Favourite word. Next session, please. As well as the training, as well as prevention and education, we also offer the same for professionals. So we have just done some wonderful sessions for the local authority on criminal exploitation, but we can come along and sort of train your staff in their responsibility. And the main thing about the training is this is not just for children's services staff. This is for a wider range of people. So I'll give you one small example. As we trained the community champions and shop floor staff within a local supermarket. I think the green colour might give it away there. But what we did see from that is people ringing up and saying, actually, I've just seen an older man with 3 young girls buying alcohol and I'm really not too sure about this. So it's all about people realising that child exploitation should be on everybody's radar, even if you don't work in children's services. Next slide. I think I've talked about our community work and I've talked about what we do, so we can flick on from that. A brand new project for us is Community Futures, and this is a brand new 5-year funded project, which we're so excited to receive 5-year funding from the National Lottery. And they realised that actually we've got a real attempt here to tackle exploitation in certain areas. What we're going to do is base our team. We've got 3 brand new staff into certain areas within Warsaw that we feel need a little bit more support on becoming resilient against exploitation. So we're going to be doing targeted education sessions for primary schools, secondary schools, the wider environment, following those sessions up with education for parents. I think we get a little bit sometimes frustrated that we can go into a school and do a wonderful session, but that message gets lost in translation back home. So what we're trying to do is build a holistic education package where we go through all of the ages in one area at one time, so we're building some resilience. The campaigns will run with businesses, local community shops, any licensed trades within those areas, hoping to increase intelligence, but also for professionals and and community members to spot the signs, be aware of what the signs are. We have 2 full-time staff on the project that's just going to be responding to initial concerns. So initial concerns of people who might have adverse childhood experiences, but the main aim to prevent exploitation in later life and to really support families before they get into crisis, before they get referred into the exploitation hub. What we're going to do with this project is leave a lasting legacy. So we're going to upskill champions, volunteers, active citizens. So when we move out of that area and into our next area, we're going to be leaving a lasting legacy of like mini street teams workers, really, mini community members that are so switched on to exploitation. Next slide. As I mentioned in my introduction, our transition project is commissioned by our local authority and also funded externally because we wanted to support children post 18. So we work a lot with semi-supported education, semi-supported living. And what we're noticing is more children at the moment, we're seeing nationally and locally, are being groomed for exploitation on that cusp of adulthood. And there's very few services out there to respond to that. So the criteria for the transition project is anybody that's been groomed prior to reaching 18, and we'll work with that young person up to the age of 25. Next slide. Some of you might have seen, but we've got some wonderful, enthusiastic children champions, and we call them our community champions, who have come to us after education sessions we've delivered in their school and said, we want to be involved with this. You know, it's a real growing concern amongst their peer networks, and they want to make sure that they can be active in their community. So they go through a 12-week programme where they get trained in exploitation, safeguarding, how to report stuff. So you might see them in their street teams t-shirts out and about doing sessions in their local supermarkets, within their local communities, within their faith groups. So they're our community champions, and that project will be expanding throughout this coming year after COVID, obviously. Next slide. Parents and Siblings was one of the first projects created by street teams, one of the first projects nationally. So we were really keen to look at parents as a supportive framework rather than parents being blamed constantly because their child is being exploited. And I think we were quite frustrated that parents seem to get blamed for a lot of this, but actually you've got a lot of parents out there who don't know what to do. They don't know how to support the child, they don't know what exploitation is. And actually, we are asking parents to go and sit into MACE meetings or child protection meetings, talking about the most horrific abuse that their child will suffer. So what we do is we work with that parent, we support that parent, and we walk them through that journey, through the local authority journey, the processes, but also their life journey of how that affects just not them, but also the younger siblings. Next slide. Our New Beginnings project, I know there's a lot of projects, sorry. We've only got 10 full-time staff, by the way. Our New Beginnings project is a project that works with rough sleeping adult sex workers. And we're really interested as we move out of this project, because that project finishes next March, but we're really looking at building the links between child sexual exploitation and adult sexual exploitation. I think there's a missing gap there, so that's something that will probably be coming soon. But our main focus is to house these people, house these women, but really support them into reintegration back into society. So we work in partnership with the Beacon, Accord, WHG, counselling, therapy. What's really interesting there, of all of the women we've supported on this project, every single one had been sexually exploited and abused prior to 16. So I think we really need to be focusing on that. And I think, Lorna, that might be my last slide. And I'll answer any questions at the end. And obviously we respond to needs. Some of those Easter eggs have been donated by the local co-op. And we make sure that every child at Christmas who's part of our service and every family member get Easter eggs, Christmas presents and food hampers, because I think we can't play down that some of our families are really struggling with poverty. So what I'm going to do is hand over to Andy Thompson, who's my operations manager, who's going to be talking about exploitation in relation to COVID-19. Thank you.
Thanks, Helen. Good afternoon, everybody. I've literally got 5 minutes to take you through about 15 slides, so I'm going to do it very quickly. I am Andy Thompson. I am the operations manager at Street Teams. We thought it would be good to talk to you about all the projects we've got at Street Teams, and please contact us if you just want to chat or talk to us for any reason. But we thought also we'd just do a little bit on the national picture we're seeing at the moment, particularly for you as professionals, and spotting the signs of young people being exploited during the COVID crisis. I'm going to call it a crisis, which appears to have a second wave on the way, who knows. So I just thought we'd run you through that. We're probably on now the slide with the COVID-19 and the Stay Home, Protect the NHS pictures. So if we can move on to this next slide, please. We just wanted to say very quickly, the COVID outbreak has closed down entire businesses. Drug lines and county lines drug lines and CSE operations, the exploitation of children, are a business. They are a business which is making a lot of money for someone. So these gangs, exploiters and groups have just updated their way of exploiting children and just been more creative and more diverse in how they're exploiting kids while this is going on. It's a very resilient market, and they don't have to be as focused on a child's health and safety as any other business. So where COVID-19 has forced all business models in the UK to adapt, county lines is no different. And we were just going to take you through what we're seeing on a national basis. Yeah, older young people who were normally out and about, roaming around, dealing drugs, being forced to deal drugs and being exploited, are a lot of the time known to police. Police have a knowledge of what's going on with them, the people who are exploiting them. That has now moved younger. You know, we have seen reported in the news children as young as 7 and 8 years old being groomed for dealing drugs, and we do a lot of work down south as well, and we have heard of 3 8-year-old boys, 8 years old, 3 8-year-old boys being held in a cuckooed premises down south, and being forced to deal drugs in their local area because they're less conspicuous. So what we would say first and foremost is, if a child talks to you about this, irrespective of their age, gender or ethnicity, just believe them and look deeper into it, because a lot of people find it hard to believe that a 7-year-old would be groomed for this. We don't. We fully understand that. If we can move on to the next theme, please. There is an increased concern around the use of girls for gang activity and for dealing drugs. It does say, this is the national picture, and it does say on here, because they find it easier to move girls around during lockdown. That's one reason. The other reason is because of the way these children are forced to have the drugs in their bodies. I'm not going to get too technical at lunchtime, but have the drugs forced into their bodies, and girls have double the capacity. Please feel free to use your imagination, but that is the reason girls are being used more in these times, because they can carry more drugs less frequently. We've had children being moved around dealing drugs regularly, little and often is what we would term it, little and often drug deals, but they can't be out and about now apart from their allowed time, and they will be spotted by the police with less people on the streets. So we have now moved from a little and often drug dealing scenario to less frequent but carrying more drugs, and girls are perfect for that. Youth services in a lot of areas have had to pull back because of COVID, and it's left young people feeling like they're unsupported. There are new hotspots around, and staying in a person's cuckoo premises for longer than you normally would, and keeping a child in that premises for longer than you normally would. So if you used to lose a child for a week, you're more likely to lose a child for a lot longer, 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, because they can't be bothered grooming anybody else. They'll just hold on to that child for longer during COVID. there is the likelihood of new children being lured into county lines because some families are working. Some parents are out working and their children are on lockdown still, in the home, on the internet, talking to people that they would probably run away from in the street. The grooming process is a very clever, very insidious, very dark. It gets around your child's safety without them even realising it. That's its job. It's not an old 40-year-old man grooming these kids. It's a 17, 18-year-old in the best trackie, the best trainers, the best hoodie. And young people have lost their supportive factors when they've lost school. They've lost a teacher they used to talk to, that teaching assistant, and their parents are out all day working. We also know that some families are allowing their children to do this because they've got no money coming in and they don't understand the full danger of it. If we can skip to the next one, please, but then I'm going to ask you to skip to the next one. So it should say stacking. We do need to talk about stacking in your local areas and in hotels as we move forward, as hotels open up. This is another adaptation of their market group. They will send out a burst marketing message by text message or by phone call to drug users and drug addicts in the local area and say that a child is going to be in one place for 10 to 15 minutes that day. And that child will turn up with a backpack on probably, and someone might deal the drugs out of that child's backpack or get the child to do it themselves. It's becoming quite conspicuous because members of the public are noticing 40 drug addicts and 40 drug users just turning up in one place for a 10 minutes period. So it's very strictly 10 to 15 minutes and then they all vanish again. We know that hotels will be used for that as well once hotels open up because it'll be less conspicuous in a bar area or in a bedroom. But that is called stacking and you just need to be aware of it. If we can move on to the next one, please. Social media. Are you talking to your young people about social media and the dangers of social media? You must have an idea about end-to-end encrypted apps. You all know what WhatsApp is and you've all got it on your phone because it's free of charge. But WhatsApp is still used because it's encrypted end-to-end. Instagram is used because you can contact the child even if you're not following them. But do you have an understanding of Viber, Telegram, and new now Wicker, which is what all these children are all being groomed on? Do you understand the threats of that? And if you don't, ask us to come along and just do a bit of internet training with you. It's all free of charge. That's what we do. And once we can come along, or you can get all your team to tune into one of these, and we'll do it on here. If we can skip forward, please. I'm not going to go massively into the next slides, but just to show you that this is in the national news. Drug gangs on recruitment drives during lockdown, increasingly girls. But I'm not going to talk about gender. I'm not going to talk about any ethnicity. As a drug dealer, if I can get my hands on a kid, I'm going to do it, and I don't care what family they're from or where they're from. If we can move down to the next one, please. Drug dealers are standing out much more during lockdown. How are they moving their supplies? I'll talk about that in 1 second. On to the next one, please. And on to the next one, please. Just to make you aware, oh, no, actually, let's go on to the next one. And the next one, it should be The Guardian. There is now a handbook for predators, perpetrators, and exploiters, which has come out of Australia. Probably, or I would say now definitely in the UK, an online exploitation booklet to show people how best and most secretively to groom our children online. Okay, you must be aware of all this kind of honeypot grooming systems. If we go down to the next one, like I said earlier, they are even dressing kids as joggers so that kids can say they're out for their daily exercise, their daily jog. Or they have been known to wear NHS ID badges so that they look like, if they're older, they look like NHS workers and the police won't bother them as much. They are also throwing drugs out of the car so that they're not, drug users may have COVID as well. So they're throwing drugs out of the car and people are throwing the money into the back seat of the car at the same time so that there's no contact. So you can see how this is adapting. Drugs availability and accessibility will become less, which is going to raise the violence. And we know now that gangs are arguing online. They just can't wait to get out there and start stabbing each other, fighting each other, and taking over each other's drug markets as soon as this as soon as this lockdown period is lifted properly. The violence, we believe the violence and the drug dealing will go off the scale as people celebrate. They're calling Saturday Super Saturday because we're allowed to go to the pub. Some police officer the other night said he thinks it's going to be worse than New Year's Eve. This thing hasn't gone anywhere, and it's very concerning for children and for victims of this. You can move on to the next slide and past the next slide, please. You can move past the business model because I think I've done that enough. You should have impacts of COVID-19 on your screen. Disrupting wholesale supply chains, restricting access to heroin and crack cocaine. So the money's going down. They will need to make that money again. And that is why there is a full recruitment drive happening now online for when this is lifted. Current little and often cash collections have become greater and less frequent. So drug gangs know that a child they see in the street who's shipping around drugs or moving drugs is potentially going to have 10 times more drugs on them than they used to have, which makes them a very valuable commodity. Workers being dropped to multiple locations from just one vehicle because it's not so conspicuous. Trains aren't running properly, buses aren't running properly, so they are now renting cars and using cars to ship children around, and also staying in a cuckoo premises for longer, close to the town, so that you can keep that drug market going nearest to the places where those drugs are needed by drug users, as your accommodation options become limited. So as a professional, we just wanted to say all of that so that we just open your eyes to how this is changing. If that child's gone missing for longer, that child seen travelling around in a car, child's being found in a cuckoo premises, we almost guarantee you that there's something going on there with regard to county lines, drug dealing, and the exploitation of children. I'll do just one of these. They will, if that's happening, have prolonged exposure to dependent drug users whose homes they are being kept in, and you've got to think about all of the potential for passing on COVID and passing on the infection. And that is it. I've whipped through that as quickly as I can. I think we've got a few minutes for questions and answers.
Yeah, thank you both very much. Really informative session, lots to really think about and be mindful of, I think. Thank you very much. There are a couple of questions I think that we've got on. Apologies for anybody that's had a little bit of a sound problem there. Just to reiterate, this is being recorded and you will have access to it after. Helen, there was a question around from Angela to say, how do they get in touch to invite you guys to the classroom in a primary school? So I think on the end slide, there's some contact details. Is that the best way to contact?
Just give us a call, drop myself an email. We've got a dedicated education worker that will be able to go into schools and deliver that. So yeah, by any means, call or email and we'll get that sorted for you. And just to say, in relation to COVID, and if you want, I know the schools are breaking up soon, but we have been doing some online education sessions using Zoom, Teams, whatever you need. So if you want something doing in the next few weeks before schools break up, we can try and arrange that for you.
Fab, thank you very much. Apologies, that's my dog. Right, I don't think there's any more questions. Fran has mentioned a resource that came out yesterday from Dr. Jessica Taylor, published on the article of grooming yesterday. She says it's an uncomfortable but interesting read for professionals. So I don't know if we'd have a link to that, maybe that we could send out after. But that might be of interest to people. Is there anything else? I mean, I think from from both locally and nationally, what you've just said, there's some really much needed projects coming locally this year, Helen, which is really interesting to hear about and think about for us all, how we can link into that following these sessions and think about the work that we're doing. You know, I was certainly thinking about a project that we're looking to run from September around children missing education, and actually the links that we could naturally bring into that. So I think that's something, you know, an ask of us all, really, isn't it, to see how we can link. Yeah, absolutely.
There's some great, amazing projects, and like, you know, the partnership, as I've mentioned, is really growing, and it's about, I suppose, how And that's why we tagged on about the national picture of exploitation. You know, the projects exist, but actually the after effects of COVID, we need to be really mindful of how that will play out in terms of the exploitation field. And what was really interesting is we've developed we've secured an allotment for our families, our parents and siblings, and our service users, because one thing that a groomer does is honing on a child's isolation and that feeling of not belonging to anyone or a lack of identity. So we're trying to be as creative as we can with social distancing measures in place to give children and families a sense of belonging to something. So it's about how we think post-COVID of how the effects of COVID will have on exploitation. So yeah, thank you for asking us to be part of it today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
No, we welcome you on board. Just to say to everybody, as Lorna's put on our question and answers and feedback from these sessions, you know that we started these sessions recently and we've got a number going over the next few weeks with inviting different partners to come and join us. So some feedback would be great, please. And Helen, I don't know if you've just seen, so Bal from Kafkas has said, will this be available in surrounding areas anytime soon? So Bal, oh, sorry, go on.
Sorry, the simple answer is no. I've got enough with Walsall, so everything is specific to Walsall. What we can,
Walsall based.
Yeah, if we can do something to support you, we'll have conversations with you. We're more than happy to come over. I don't know what area you're from, Bal, sorry, but we'll have a discussion with you. But I think we need to just concentrate on Walsall. But I can put you in touch with other services similar. We have a network of agencies that we link in closely with.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Dead on time.
Thanks,
as well.
guys.
So thank you all very much for joining us today, and hope you find it really informative. I absolutely have, and I welcome working together in the future.
Great. Thank
you all.
Bye all.
Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Bye.